We'll talk about that.
It's quite poor. Hello and welcome, my name is Ian and this channel is all about music and art, and I've just completed my first interview. And that's with the man behind Held by Trees, a guy called David Joseph. Now, if you don't know who Held by Trees are, it's the instrumental project that David started during lockdown. In fact, here is the album. So the album is called Solace. We've got a link to buy it in the description. And I made it Album of the Month in the October 2020 Audiophile Radio Show. It's a stunning piece of work. And what makes this album so special is not only that David has managed to capture the essence of the late Talk Talk albums, such as Spirit of Eden, Laughingstock and the solo Mark Hollis album, but he's also managed to convince a lot of the people that played on those albums to play on Solace, which I have to say is quite incredible. We have guitarist Robbie McIntosh, percussionist Martin Ditcham, pianist Lawrence Penrose are all included. The record is mixed by Talk Talk collaborator Phil Brown, and he's also managed to get David Knopfler, ex-Dire Straits, to play. He's even managed to get James Marsh, who painted the cover art on all of the Talk Talk records, to design the Held by Trees logo. It's a fantastic piece of work. David and I talked over Zoom for about an hour and a half, so I've split the video into 3 parts. David had the builders in, so there are the odd sounds of building works going on and nail guns going off. And although I have treated the audio with Isotopes RX to minimise any of the disruption, it's not a perfect audio. So apologies in advance if the background noise is distracting at times. In the first part, we talk about David's background and the other bands that he's worked with. In part 2, we discuss Ben Wardle's book on Mark Hollis, which came out this year. That book's called A Perfect Silence. And we also discuss how Held by Trees came about. And in part 3, we really get down to the nuts and bolts of how the album got made and how David got everyone to play on the record. So I hope you enjoy. So, I mean, first of all, David, I don't normally do interviews, so I might be really rubbish at this. But thanks very much for doing this. It's just brilliant. And what a stunning piece of work. Absolutely brilliant album. You know, it's just wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's always fun to chat to people about the music, because it's I think it's a fairly interesting story. If you're a bit of a muso and if you're a bit of a sleeve note reader,
Yeah.
then it's a fun story, because that's really what I am. I'm a sleeve note reading geek, and this is a bit of a sort of who's who of the sleeve notes that I read growing up, that have gone on to be on this record. So
I know, because
when I look through quite a satisfying story.
Yeah, it's just absolutely wonderful, you know. So before we get into it, what I'd like to know, I mean, I've jotted a few questions down, but it's just a chat, you know. So what was your background in music? Where did you start from?
My background, well, a very musical home, and 2 parents who were both very musical, and encouraged us to get stuck into piano lessons at an early age, and we're a very musical family in this such as we had music on a lot uh, vinyl records on, tapes in the car. My parents were fairly late adopters of the compact disc, so we didn't have those till I was sort of 11 or 12, which is 10 years after everybody else. But as soon as we had the CD player, pretty much I started buying music for myself. But we're also a church family, and
Right.
playing in the band at church every week was a big factor in sort of how we fostered that kind of musical environment. And my brother and sister and I were very involved in that, with my dad in particular at church. So that was a kind of quite a fertile soil for these little trees to be planted in, really.
Yeah. So I mean, that's great. So what sort of success? I mean, apologies, because I until finding this, and I found this through, it was Stuart McConney played it on his. I think he played it on his Freak Zone, which.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought, wow, I've got to, I've got to get that. Was my first reaction. So, what's your musical background in sense of? So, have you had any success before this?
Yeah, I mean, my career in terms of recorded music, I sort of became obsessed with recording as a really quite a young lad. Really, my dad was in a band that built their own studio in a shed.
Wow, that's
and in the summer of '96, he took my brother and sister and me, and we went over to this shed full of recording equipment and recorded a little song, and that gave me a real bug for recording. That was with his mate John, I should mention, who remains a really good friend to this day. And from there, I used to sort of beg, steal, and borrow equipment from people. So sort of, Tascam 4-tracks and things. And I started to record and release music with my brother involved in a lot of it, on the drums, as Bosch, which was a band that sort of became, when we got to our late teens, other people joined, and it became moderately successful in as much as we started to gig all around the UK, and then started to be flown places to play a little bit.
My heart of flesh has turned tonight. Every shadow seems to be darker than before tonight. Every emotion from my soul has bled now. I know I need you now.
But it sort of ran its course by the time we were in our mid 20s, and that disbanded in 2011. From there, I began making a bit more ambient electronic music and released quite a few things under different names. I've also done quite a lot been involved in the gospel CCM scene,
Yeah.
and released music in that world as well. But it wasn't until I started to, that was all sort of CD based, which was
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
but it wasn't until I was releasing ambient instrumental music a few years ago that I got some traction on streaming,
Right.
and that started to open up a whole new world for me. And I got to meet a lot of really cool people around the world just through the sort of ambient music
Yeah, because I mean, I have to say,
community.
I'm still yet to find that I do ambient electronica, but sort of more experimental stuff. So and I know that for me, my music is a very small pool of people that would be interested in it. Fundamentally, I think we make music for ourselves, so
Definitely.
so I listen. It sounds really crass, but I listen to my own albums. I go back and listen to them occasionally. I think I'm really quite proud of that. Now, it's nice when people contact you and say, I liked what you did there. It's my stuff was never mainstream, although I have played in pop bands. So
Mhm.
it's quite the ambient thing is, and certainly the electronica is the new rock and roll to some extent. There's a much sort of bigger scene growing, I think, now, and people more interested in that sort of music.
I think rock and roll, when it came along 70 years ago, broke a lot of rules.
Mm.
Uh, and was wildly popular with the youth of that time because of it. And I think electronica, in a similar way, does that as well quite effectively. It kind of it's given people, I guess punk was the next wave, wasn't it, in the
Yeah, it was.
70s, of
Yeah,
back
yeah,
to basics,
yeah.
breaking the established rules. You don't have to be a wizard on the guitar to make, you don't have to be uh, sort of Rick Wakeman or
Yeah.
David Gilmour to make music. You can have three chords and the truth and get back to basics.
And I
And I
did.
think computer music, the ability to use your laptop and control, um, make beats and control sound just in the comfort of your bedroom has afforded a generation a similar freedom. Yeah,
Definitely. I
breaking
mean,
the rurules.
yeah,
People from like Aphex Twin onwards, really.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't buy into the punk thing right at the beginning. I mean, I remember liking the Clash's first album because a friend lent me it and I'm thinking this is really quite good. But I don't. But we were quite upset. We were a local band, and the bass player instantly left and went and joined a punk band. And it was like we were, oh,
No.
come on, and there we were
Yeah,
trying to learn our instruments and learning more than three chords. But and much later on, I certainly, I embraced new wave rather than punk. I think that was much more my sort of thing.
yeah. I get that. I think there's a bit more nuance to new wave.
Yeah,
Uh, Potentially, people might disagree with that, but I think new wave encompasses a lot more. And actually, no wave. I really like no wave music from New York
yeah.
in the late 70s, like Suicide, and I'm less into them. I'm more into Swans.
I don't know.
I'm
I don't
really
know.
kind of obsessed with Swans
I
and
know
Sonic
suicide.
Youth.
I know suicide. And I could appreciate it, but at the time, I didn't buy into it at all. I appreciate it. It's like a lot of things. You appreciate them with age to some extent. I can go back and listen to it and think, why did, and I'm thinking, why didn't I like this at the time?
Yeah,
It's
it's
weird.
funny that, isn't it? Like I can sympathise with that in as much as I think growing up in the 90s, I think 80s music was so suddenly of its time and dated, it was kind of maligned, especially in light of the Britpop movement, which
Yeah,
kind of I was swept up in as a teenager. And 80s music was sort of seen as kind of synthetic compared to
yeah,
um, the 90s guitar scene. But actually, it didn't take me long to rediscover the 80s and the wonderful music made then, and still to this day, I think probably, other than the big Britpop bands, I probably prefer 80s music
yeah,
to
yeah.
90s music.
Yeah, I didn't. The only Britpop band that I really embraced was Pulp at the time. I'm
Yep.
obviously slightly older than you, so I was, to some extent, the '80s was my heyday in terms of. I mean, I used to listen to records like ABC and Duran Duran, and I liked pop music, and I always have done. And I like melody, but I would think I have
Yes.
no idea how you've made this record. It was so sort of, almost over the top in its production values.
It was, and I think the production reached its peak in the
Yeah,
80s. And actually, since then, I mean, in terms of technology and sound quality, we haven't improved upon the high benchmark of the 80s and the mixture of organic sound and synthesized sound, but synthesized with analog gear,
yeah,
not
yeah,
with
yeah.
just computers. Even the Fairlight and obviously the Juno, Roland Juno, and then the DX7, and all these amazing sounds that I think now are seen as kind of acceptable sounds and not tethered to the 80s the way they were
Yeah.
15,
Yeah.
20 years ago. They are set free. So the bands, big pop artists like The Weeknd or Daft Punk can use those sounds very knowingly, but they're contemporary again.
Mm.
And bands like The Midnight that really specialize in the kind of throwback nostalgic sound, but it's timeless now, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
I would go
yeah,
so far as to say it's
yeah,
timeless.
yeah, yeah. Super. It's yeah. So When did you first get into Talk Talk?
I got into Talk Talk. Now this could this
So
could
I,
draw some ire from people. I got into Talk Talk off the back of reading Q magazine in about 2005. It must have been, and there was a little interview in there with Chris Martin from Coldplay
oh right, yeah,
about five albums that he loves. And in that five, I think there was like a Kraftwerk album in there, and there was an Echo and the Bunnymen album in there. But there was a brief description of Spirit of Eden. He cited Spirit of Eden as an influence, and he said, I just love this gorgeous album that's dripping with atmosphere. And I've loved atmospheric music since I was a really young boy. Listening to stuff like Private Investigations and Telegraph Road by
yeah,
Dire Straits,
Superbo, yeah,
or Pink Floyd, or even sort of like Sky and
oh yeah,
instrumental music like that. Mike Oldfield, anything with atmosphere, I love. And so I thought I must hear this, and sniffed it out. I can't remember whether I bought it in the record shop or ordered it online, but I listened to Spirit of Eden and was immediately transfixed by it. And I very, very quickly got hold of Laughing Stock and Mark Hollis's solo record. And it wasn't for a few years after that I found Colour of Spring and found the sort of the foundations for where they went.
yeah.
There in the Colour of Spring, and it's some of the B-sides that they did. And so yeah, that was sort of 17 years ago or so. Yeah. And I became sort of almost obsessed with how it was made.
I know you
and
mean. Yeah.
The kind of legendary sessions
yeah,
that went towards what it ultimately became, and all those kind of musicians that were invited in and asked to improvise over the chord structures, but also just the kind of the mystery around the lyrics and the kind of mysticism embedded in there that I think people probably don't know how to approach talking about Mark's lyrics, because they're almost so abstract and mystical that they're really hard to tell what he's actually talking about. But there's a lot of beauty there.
I mean, I came to them really early on. I mean, because I'm of that age of the early 80s, so, and obviously being into synth pop, as we'll call it, and listening to the early Talk Talk albums and dancing with, to Today and Talk Talk and those early songs. And then I sort of forgot about them, because you move on and, things move on. And I was working in a hi-fi shop, and people used to bring CDs in, and somebody brought in The Colour of Spring. And I went, oh, it's that band I used to like, and I was with this guy for about 40 minutes listening to this music, and I'm thinking, this album's absolutely stunning. It's absolutely brilliant. And I was completely hooked from that point on, right the way through, and the sort of...
Did you leave a comment on Instagram about that?
No, I didn't. I
on Facebook?
It might have been Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that story, someone left a comment when I posted up about Spirit of Eden, and I think if it wasn't you, then someone's got a very similar story.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful thing that you were able to sort of track with them as they release these records. Unlike people like me who come to it later and sort of we get landed with it all at once almost.
Yeah.
I wonder how it might have been to kind of track with them.
Because I mean, Spirit of Eden, I just thought was beautiful. But then Laughing Stock, I did, I listened to Laughing Stock, and at first I thought, I'm not so sure I actually like this, because some of it's really quite discordant, and I'd never really heard it. I mean, you can see the progression, but I'd never really heard anything like that, because it's not jazz, it's not classical, it's not rock. I know it's called post rock, but I didn't,
I think that phrase was termed years after Laughing
Yeah.
Stock was released. It wasn't until '94, I think, that a journalist grouped all of these kind of albums and bands together. And actually, they were talking about Bark Psychosis.
Yeah,
When,
I've heard
they-
that, yeah, you know, and the
Yeah,
fact that
turned-
I mean, I can see that where they're coming from in Talked Up. I don't, for me, they don't get close enough. So it didn't, they didn't resonate with me. And the funny thing about music is, you know, why should one album or one artist resonate with you, and other people go, that's rubbish, you know. And you have that dichotomy of, you know, everybody literally is different, and you know, why do I like so and so and you like so and so, and we might somewhere meet in the middle. You know, I don't like heavy metal, and I played in a band with a drummer who was an absolute obsessive of Metallica, and I don't get Metallica. There's a couple of songs I quite like, but it's just not me, you know. It's just one of those sort of things, really. But
Sorry, I think there's a nail gun going off.
yeah. Oh yeah, so there is. Don't worry.
Let's just wait a sec for it to pass.
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, listening to Metallica is very similar to listening to a nail gun.
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant, pleasant sound.
Yeah.
I'm not into Metallica. I'm not into much metal.
Yeah.
But why is it then that I love heavy noise rock like Sonic Youth and Dinosaur Jr. or there's quite a lot of really heavy music that I enjoy.
Yeah. It's great when the builders are in, isn't it? It's funny.
You're very welcome to chop all this out or leave it in.
I'll do what I can with it.
Serves me right for trying to do this at home, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't have anywhere else to go at the moment.